Merciless, 30 stories high, breathing fire, his head in the sky, Godzilla
knows how well. I have defeated the Panther. By your own law, the Athenian here is free.
Oh no.
You know how some cartoons just never leave you, even decades later? The 70s gave us a bunch of those gems, shows that became a huge part of childhood for Gen X kids. These weren't just Saturday morning fillers, they had wild stories, unique styles, and characters that felt larger than life. Even if they've slipped into the background today, fans still remember them with a smile. And trust me, when we hit number 4, you'll see why it was one of the biggest blockbusters of the time. Number 1. Battle of the Planets, 1978 to 80. Even though it's kind of forgotten today, back in the 70s and 80s, Battle of the Planets was nothing short of a masterpiece. For a lot of Gen X kids, this wasn't just a cartoon. It was an experience. Saturday mornings were, in a word, amazing. The bird-themed suits, the futuristic ships, the high-tension space battles, and that whole larger-than-life vibe gave it a spot in childhood memories that still hasn't faded for many fans. What made it special was how different it felt compared to the usual cartoons of that time. It wasn't goofy or overly simple. It was dramatic, exciting, and full of that space opera energy that kids had just gotten a taste of with Star Wars. You had G-Force, a team of 5 young heroes who fought together to defend Earth. They weren't just random characters thrown in for laughs. Each one had a role, a personality, and together they showed what teamwork and courage could look like. That message stuck with kids who watched it every week. Now, yeah, a lot of the darker moments from the Japanese version were cut out for American audiences. Instead, we got 7 Zark 7, the little robot in his underwater base, explaining everything in a cheerful way and keeping things light. At the time, it worked. He gave younger kids a way to follow the story and made sure everything felt safe. Looking back, it was a clever fix, even if it sometimes felt like he was popping in just to tell us the heroes were fine. But you know what? It didn't ruin the magic. If anything, it made Battle of the Planets stand out even more. By the time G-Force Guardians of Space came around in the mid-80s, things shifted. This version stayed closer to the original story, skipped the added robot commentary, and had a more serious tone. The villains were scarier, the action had more weight, and it gave fans a stronger sense of what the Japanese creators originally intended. Sure, the voice acting was rough, but the authenticity made up for it. It felt raw, real, and in its own way, just as memorable. Looking back, both Battle of the Planets and G-Force were way ahead of their time. They introduced an entire generation to Japanese animation, even if we didn't realize it then. The hand-drawn visuals, the epic music, the serialized storytelling, it all built a fan base that still remembers it with love today. These weren't just Saturday morning cartoons, they were gateways into a whole new world of storytelling. And for Gen X, they'll always be part of what made growing up in that era so unforgettable. Number 2. Star Blazers, 1979. Man, if you were a kid in the late 70s or early 80s, you probably remember waking up on Saturday mornings with your cereal bowl, eyes glued to the TV. And if you were lucky, you caught the Star Blazers. Now, this wasn't just another cartoon to kill time before lunch. No, this was something different. Something that felt bigger, more serious, and way ahead of its time. For starters, Star Blazers didn't play by the same rules as Scooby-Doo or Looney Tunes, where each episode hit the reset button. Instead, it told one long, continuous story. Earth was dying after a massive alien attack, and the only hope for humanity was the crew of the Argo, who had to travel across the galaxy and back within a year to save it. Every episode pushed the story forward, and the ticking countdown to Earth's extinction kept the suspense at full throttle. You missed an episode? You actually felt lost. For kids used to shows that never really went anywhere, this was mind-blowing. And then there were the characters. They weren't flat, cookie-cutter heroes who always made the right call. Derek Wildstar started as a hothead, but grew into a leader. Captain Avatar carried the weight of the mission on his shoulders. And when he died, man, that was a gut punch. Kids weren't used to dealing with grief in a cartoon, yet here we were, sitting on the couch trying to process real emotions. It made these characters feel human, like people you could know. Let's talk about Argo. That ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a character itself. A repurposed battleship turned into Earth's last hope. With its scars, history, and of course the legendary wave motion gun, the Argo was unforgettable. The battles were intense, the risks felt real, and every time that giant cannon fired, you knew something big was about to go down. For kids obsessed with spaceships and sci-fi, it was basically Saturday morning Star Wars. What also made Star Blazer stand out was how heavy the themes were. It didn't shy away from war, sacrifice, or the idea that sometimes heroes fail. The characters struggled with tough decisions and even lost friends along the way. For many of us, it was the first show that made us think about consequences, about what it really meant to fight for survival. That kind of storytelling just wasn't happening in other cartoons. And then there's the presentation. The animation looked more detailed, more gritty, compared to the softer, playful style of American shows. The soundtrack was orchestral, sweeping, and powerful. It gave the whole thing a scale that made it feel like an epic saga, not just another Saturday morning cartoon. That's why decades later, fans still remember Star Blazers. It was more than just entertainment. It was a rite of passage. It showed kids that cartoons could be serious, emotional, even heartbreaking. And it proved that animated shows could tell stories as grand as anything on the big screen. That's why Star Blazers still has its loyal fan base today. It wasn't just ahead of its time. It changed what we thought cartoons could be. Number 3. Flash Gordon, Filmation, 1979 to 80. Back in 1979, Filmation took a big swing with the new adventures of Flash Gordon, and it's safe to say it paid off. This wasn't just another Saturday morning cartoon, it felt like a true space epic that treated its audience with a lot more respect than most shows of that time. The animation was colorful and vibrant, with exotic landscapes of Mongo and all its strange kingdoms brought to life in a way that felt larger than life. Kids who tuned in on Saturday mornings suddenly found themselves in a world filled with lion men, hawk people, shark men, and frozen kingdoms, all battling under the shadow of the sinister Ming the Merciless. What made it stand out was how faithful it stayed to Alex Raymond's original comics. Flash, Dale Arden, and Dr. Zarkov weren't just campy caricatures, they felt like real adventurers. Ming wasn't watered down either. He was as menacing as fans remembered, ruling Mongo with fear while scheming from his city. Even though the show had to tone down certain things for a younger audience, it still kept that pulpy, high-stakes energy that made the original comics so popular in the first place. The first season especially leaned into serialized storytelling, which was rare for cartoons at the time. Instead of random standalone episodes, kids followed an ongoing story as Flash and his friends fought to survive and eventually defeat Ming. That level of continuity gave the show a real sense of weight and excitement. And let's not forget the production value. Filmation really poured effort into this one. They used rotoscoping and even early computer effects to give ships and movements a smoother, more cinematic feel. The voice cast sold it too. Robert Ridgely as Flash and Alan Oppenheimer pulling double duty as Zarkov and Ming gave the series a dramatic edge. Even the music and narration made it feel like a big sci-fi adventure rather than just a cartoon. Of course, things changed in the second season. NBC wanted the show to be more episodic, easier to rerun, and lighter in tone. That's when the pink baby dragon gremlin showed up. And while some kids loved the cute addition, older fans felt it pulled the series into sillier territory. Still, that first season, and even much of the second, had enough world-building, action, and heart to leave a big mark on fans. Looking back, it's easy to see why people still talk about it today. The show captured the spirit of the original Flash Gordon strips better than most adaptations ever did. It had ambition, atmosphere, and a level of storytelling that was way ahead of most Saturday morning fare. For a generation of kids, this was their Star Wars on TV, and it's remembered fondly as one of the best things Filmation ever produced. Number 4. Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, Filmation, 1976 to 80. When Filmation's Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle first aired in 1976, it didn't just give audiences a Saturday morning adventure, it created a masterpiece that raised a whole generation of fans. Unlike most cartoons of the era, which often simplified characters and stories for younger viewers, this version of Tarzan aimed higher. It was faithful to Edgar Rice Burroughs' novels. It respected the intelligence of its audience, and it delivered a jungle experience that felt alive and authentic. One of the biggest reasons fans loved this series was its portrayal of Tarzan himself. Instead of the me Tarzan, you Jane stereotype popularized in earlier films, Filmation's Tarzan was intelligent, articulate, and noble. A hero whose manner reflected his English heritage just as much as his upbringing in the jungle. Robert Ridgely's commanding yet warm voice work made this Tarzan the definitive animated version for many viewers, while Danton Burroughs, the grandson of Edgar Rice Burroughs, lent authenticity by performing the iconic Tarzan yell. That small detail alone connected the show directly to its literary roots. The show's faithfulness went even further. It embraced the Mangani language of the great apes, with Tarzan speaking words like tantor for elephant and numa for lion, and even using unk to dismiss animals. These touches thrilled fans of the books and gave kids a sense that they were stepping into a fully realized world. The series also brought to life Burroughs' Lost Cities, adding a sense of mystery, mythology, and grandeur rarely seen in Saturday morning animation. Visually, Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, stood head and shoulders above most cartoons of its time. Filmation used extensive rotoscoping based on Byrne Hogarth's dynamic comic art, resulting in fluid, lifelike movement for Tarzan. The jungles he roamed weren't flat backdrops, they were lush, detailed, and atmospheric, creating a sense of depth and danger. Paired with an eerie, exotic soundtrack, the show's production transported viewers into a jungle that felt both enchanting and menacing. Memorable characters like Nkima the monkey and even Jod Baljaw the golden lion added to the charm, grounding the series in Burroughs' lore. Over time, Tarzan teamed up with Batman, the Super Seven, the Lone Ranger, and even Zorro through syndication. But fans always remembered his solo adventures as the purest expression of the Jungle Lord's story. Looking back, Filmation's Tarzan remains one of the most faithful and ambitious adaptations of Burroughs' work. It gave kids a hero who is smart, noble, and deeply tied to his jungle home. With its mix of authenticity, artistry, and adventure, the series wasn't just a cartoon. It was a cultural touchstone that showed just how powerful Saturday morning storytelling could be. Number 5. The Godzilla Power Hour, 1978-79. While this may have been forgotten, this one shares a fair number of memories in the childhoods of Gen X kids. And if today's kids were to watch it, they would certainly admire it, putting it on their Mount Rushmore of cartoons. Back in the late 70s, Hanna-Barbera brought Godzilla to Saturday morning TV with the Godzilla Power Hour. And for a whole generation of kids, this was their Godzilla. Long before streaming or DVD, this show was the one consistent way to get a dose of monster action every single week. And that's what made it stand out. It delivered what kids wanted most: Godzilla himself, stomping in to fight a brand new monster almost every episode. That Monster of the Week format was simple, sure, but it was endlessly exciting. What really set this version apart was how it reimagined Godzilla. Instead of the menacing destroyer from the movies, here he was a hero, fighting alongside a group of scientists aboard their research ship, the Calico. He wasn't an enemy of humanity, he was a guardian. For a lot of kids, this was their introduction to Godzilla, and the idea of him being a friend and protector made a lasting impression. Then, of course, there was Godzooky, Godzilla's goofy little nephew. He couldn't breathe fire properly and usually ended up coughing up smoke, but he was designed to win over younger audiences, and he did. For kids watching in the late 70s, Godzooky was the comic relief that balanced out Godzilla's towering presence. The production itself carried that signature Hanna-Barbera style. The animation wasn't as fluid as big-budget films, but it had charm. The designs by Doug Wildey, who also worked on Jonny Quest, gave the human cast and environments a more realistic look than many cartoons at the time. The jungles, oceans, deserts, even Atlantis and prehistoric worlds all had a colorful, adventurous feel that pulled viewers in. And then there was Godzilla himself. He was green instead of charcoal gray, he breathed fire instead of his signature atomic breath, and his size shifted constantly depending on the scene. To some hardcore fans, those changes were jarring, but to kids tuning in every Saturday morning, none of that mattered. This was their Godzilla and they loved him. And here's the thing, even though critics say it was repetitive or too simplistic, the show built a genuine fan base. People who grew up watching it still remember it fondly, They talk about catching it on Cartoon Network or Boomerang years later and feeling that same spark of excitement they had as kids. It might not have been perfect, but it had heart. It gave Godzilla a whole new role and showed he could work in a different kind of story, one filled with adventure, hope, and fun. That's why the Godzilla Power Hour wasn't just another Saturday morning cartoon. It was ahead of its time, and it remains a beloved piece of Godzilla's long history. Number 6. Dynomutt, Dog Wonder with Blue Falcon, 1976-77. If you grew up with Saturday morning cartoons, there's a good chance Dynomutt, Dog Wonder sits somewhere in your memory. On the surface, it was a silly superhero show, but look closer, and you see why it felt ahead of its time. It mixed action and comedy, used cool gadgets in every scene, and kept crossing over with other shows to build a bigger world. That blend helped it grab an audience then, and it's why fans still smile when they hear the Falcon flash. Our hero is Radley Crown, a rich art dealer who turns into the Blue Falcon whenever Big City needs help. Gary Owens gave him that classic hero voice. His partner is the star of the show, Dynomutt, voiced by Frank Welker. He's a talking robo-dog packed with gizmos. Arms stretch like springs. Tools pop out of everywhere, and he can fly, grapple, and yank a whole toolkit from his chest in seconds, and he's a lovable disaster. He means well, but he often makes a mess before he saves the day. That push and pull between slick superhero and clumsy sidekick gives the show its heart. Every episode follows a clean rhythm. The Falcon flash goes off. Radley and Dynomutt duck into the Falcon's lair, suit up, and take orders from FOCUS-1. They jump in the Falcon car, which is part car, part plane, and head out to stop a themed villain. Big City feels like a comic book playground. The show even used a laugh track, a true 70s touch that made the action feel playful and safe for younger kids. The series ran on ABC from September 1976 to October 1977, with 20 episodes across 2 seasons. Joseph Ruby and Ken Spears created it, and you can feel their fingerprints in the tight plots and steady pace. The animation is classic Hanna-Barbera, limited in motion but bold in design. Capes, lairs, sky chases, sliding doors, and colorful cityscapes keep the screen busy. For kids, that was enough. The show put gadgets and gags front and center, which made it easy to follow and fun to rewatch. What really made Dynomutt stand out was how it lived inside a larger cartoon universe. It launched as part of the Scooby-Doo Dynomutt Hour, then rolled through blocks like the Scooby-Doo Dynomutt Show and Scooby's All-Star Laugh Olympics. The Mystery Inkers gang popped in often, and those team-ups taught kids that these worlds connected. That idea feels normal today, but in the mid-70s, it felt fresh. And the legacy kept growing. Blue Falcon and Dynomutt have popped up again and again, each time reintroduced for a new generation. They showed up in Dexter's laboratory, where the buzzard kills Dynomutt, leading to a wild detour with a too serious Dynomutt 2.0 until the real duo returns. They appeared in Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law as a legal parody, with Blue Falcon recast as the lawyer Azul Falcone. They starred in Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated's Heart of Evil, which gave them a dramatic origin at Quest Labs and a grittier Blue Falcon. They headlined the direct-to-video Scooby-Doo Mask of the Blue Falcon and later returned in Scoob with a modern spin. Mark Wahlberg voiced a new Blue Falcon, Brian Crown, who inherited the mantle from his father, Radley. More cameos followed, including Scooby-Doo and Guess Who and Jellystone. All of this kept the fan base alive. If you watched in the 70s, you remember the Falcon car taking off and Dynomutt's arms snapping out like rubber bands. If you met them later on Cartoon Express, Cartoon Network, or streaming, you met the same cheerful vibe with a few new tricks. The show never asked you to overthink it. It gave you a hero, a goofy partner, a clear mission, and a city to save. It made you laugh and still delivered a superhero punch. That's why Dynomutt, Dog Wonder hit harder than people give it credit for. It treated gadgets as characters. It blended crossovers long before that was common. It proved a hero can be square and still cool. And it showed that a clumsy sidekick can carry a series with heart. Decades later, fans still quote it, still hum the theme, and still feel that buzz when the Falcon flash lights up. Some shows fade, this one stuck, and it's easy to see why. Number 7. C-Lab 2020, 1972. Sealab 2020 is one of those shows that people still talk about because it felt way ahead of its time. Premiering back in 1972, this Hanna-Barbera cartoon wasn't just another Saturday morning distraction. It mixed action-adventure storytelling with a real sense of purpose. Instead of just slapstick or goofy antics, Sealab 2020 dropped kids straight into the world of ocean science, exploration, and conservation. That was a bold move for its time, especially when most cartoons were all about quick laughs or simple adventures. The premise itself was fascinating. Sealab was this futuristic underwater base set on the Challenger seamount, housing 250 men, women, and children. Each one of them was portrayed as a kind of science pioneer, living in this high-tech community beneath the waves. Just the setup alone was enough to fire up kids' imaginations. This idea of people living and working under the sea felt like science fiction, but rooted in real-world possibilities. The narration would kick things off in this deep, commanding tone, making it all feel epic and important, almost like you were about to watch a documentary mixed with adventure. What really stood out was how much the show leaned into education while still keeping things entertaining. Each 22-minute episode would tackle challenges like toxic spills, shark threats, or radiation from nuclear waste. Heavy stuff for a cartoon, right? But Sealab 2020 managed to explain those dangers in a way that kids could understand, while also keeping the excitement going with rescues, close calls, and discoveries. It was an early attempt at raising awareness about environmental issues, decades before ocean pollution and overfishing became mainstream conversations. Fans also loved the characters. Captain Michael Murphy led the Sealab team, and his kids, Sally and Bobby, often found themselves in trouble, adding that relatable element for younger viewers. And of course, being a Hanna-Barbera production, the animation had that classic style people were familiar with, from the Jetsons or Scooby-Doo. But here, it was used to create something with more depth, literally and figuratively. The underwater world felt alive, dangerous, and mysterious. Even the music left an impression. Sure, some people today might call it cheesy, but back then it gave the show its own vibe, something distinct from the usual Saturday morning fare. Together, the sound, the animation, and the stories built an atmosphere that stuck with fans long after it left the airwaves. Sealab 2020 only ran for 13 episodes, but that short run didn't stop it from building a dedicated fan base. People still recall how unique it was. Educational, adventurous, and surprisingly thoughtful for a cartoon aimed at kids. It showed that animation could be more than just laughs. It could inspire curiosity about the world, especially the oceans. In many ways, Sealab 2020 wasn't just ahead of its time. It was predicting the conversations we're still having today about protecting marine life and respecting the environment. That's why, all these years later, fans still remember it as a masterpiece that dared to do something different. That's a wrap on today's trip down memory lane. These classics might be tucked away in the past, but the memories they created still hit hard. If you want more nostalgia content, whether it's forgotten cartoons, legendary movies, or iconic series, you're in the right place. We've got plenty more blasts from the past coming your way. So don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow fans, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment sharing your favorite throwback.